You are listening to the SDSU podcast presented by the East Village Times with your hosts Andre Hagverdian and Paul Garrison. Welcome, listeners, to episode 132 of the SDSU podcast. I'm your host, Andre Hagverdian. We'll be joined shortly by my co-host, Paul Garrison. Today's episode is our first podcast interview with the new head football coach at San Diego State, Sean Lewis. We had a chance to catch up with Coach Lewis on Monday afternoon for about 20 minutes. Coach Lewis is a offensive play caller and brings an offensive background. We decided to ask him some questions about defense, how he approached hiring his coaching staff, the scheme that they would run, who would help run that, and how that can complement his offense. And so it was cool to get some feedback from him on that, along with how they're approaching the transfer portal and NIL and so forth. So great conversation. Hopefully we will have Coach Lewis on multiple times, obviously throughout his tenure at San Diego State. But let's get to the interview, and then Paul and I will be back at the end to give some of our takeaways. We want to welcome San Diego State's head football coach, Sean Lewis, to the podcast. How's it going, Coach?
Guys, going great. Happy to be here.
So, with spring camp over, I'm sure you have a lot of open time on your hands, right?
It is on to the next thing, right? I'm getting a chance to showcase our great city, our great university, and you turn the page and you go on to the next thing and do it to the best of your ability.
So how has the second transfer portal been treating you? What does the month of May hold for your program?
Yeah, I mean, it's been good. Been a lot of interest. Obviously, there's a ton of buzz and excitement around the program. So, as we get rolling, we've already hosted one major OV weekend. We got a couple more coming down the pipe here early May as we move into, obviously, our guys finishing up finals. And then as we transition into summer conditioning and summer school, right, we want to make sure that we have our roster whole and healthy and build up the competitive depth so we can get rocking and rolling and take all these guys and continue to build this team.
So, I know you're an offensive guy. At a lot of press conferences, you get asked by offense. So we're going to ask you about defense here.
Let's go. Love that.
For the past 15 years, for Aztec Nation, they were told that the best defense is a ball control offense, right? The implication is when offenses play fast, it can make playing defense more challenging. How do you figure to kind of combat that, I guess, with the offense that you play?
Yeah, I mean, right, there's a lot of different ways to win, and that's what you have to be loyal to. You got to be loyal to winning, right? And each game is different, right? And each style of play is a little bit different, right? And there's a lot of different ways that you can control the game, whether that's through time of possession, whether that's through explosive plays. But at the end of the day, we're going to be loyal to winning. We're not going to sacrifice or compromise one area of the game just for another area. And we're still going to be a well-rounded football team that's going to be able to stop teams defensively, right? Limit those explosive plays, generate some explosive plays, and be dynamic within special teams.
Coach, when you look at your offensive staff, there's a lot of continuity, a lot of people who have worked for you before with you. On the defensive side, you don't really see that at all. Could that be judged as maybe kind of a reset on what you have kind of understood to do what you just talked about and build that complementary offense and defense and special teams?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think each job is unique, the same way that each week is unique in how you're going to win, right? And so the staff that we were able to put together, it's a championship staff. Being able to get Coach Schmidt down from Washington and CJ with him to come with, right, their continuity, and then to add the experiences that we have with the number of coordinators that we do on that side of the ball, with adding Coach Ulrich and his familiarity, with the system. Obviously, the tremendous job that Coach Sum has done in acquiring talent and developing them here on the Mesa for darn near a decade, right? He's played a huge role in all the elite defenses that have been here. And then to bring in Coach Lose and his expertise again of, this region of the country and what we're going to do defensively. I just thought it was critical to put together a staff, on that side of the ball that complemented all that we were going to do and that had great knowledge of the region and what we wanted to get built here on the Mesa so that we could be successful, again, in all phases, right? But I've learned and I've grown, right? The 4-2-5 is what suits and style of play that, we wanted to get into with all of it. And so you needed a man of high character to lead it, a guy who was competent in his skills and showed great consistency in what he had done. And Coach Schmidt had done that, right? At all levels, whether it was as a defense coordinator, a special teams coordinator, and thrilled to have him a part of this thing and leading the charge, on the defense side of the ball.
Andre and I are hard at work covering the team, and we've talked to a lot of people about you in that time. And one compliment that comes out over and over again is your consistency and your willingness to continually grow and improve. And you've referred to things that have happened in the past as scars that you proudly wear.
Yeah.
If you look at since 2018 at Kent State, including Colorado, you've actually given up more points than you've scored every year, with the exception of the shortened COVID season. What have those experiences taught you that you are using and putting into practice here with the Aztecs?
Yeah, again, just a bunch of lessons learned, right? And again, it's kind of that shift from early on as a really young, dumb head coach and a former, offensive play caller. That was exclusively my job, right? You thought about the game in that way and just, hey, we're going to go outscore people, as opposed to, again, having some hard lessons learned, right? And being able to grow as a coach and pivot and transition to this head coach mindset, right? To be able to win the game a lot of different ways and be able to manage the game. And again, have some really smart people that I've been able to tap into to help me grow in that regard as well, right? So that, hey, when the opportunities presents itself, there's nothing more important to winning. You got to be loyal to winning and do what's required to win, whatever that looks like, within each week and within each game.
Is there anything, though, more specifically, I think I asked a bad question, about the defensive side of the ball that experience taught you and that you wanted to make sure as you were hitting the ground running here at San Diego State that you addressed?
Yeah, I mean, just making sure that they're prepared for all facets of the game, right? Obviously, we have a unique style of play. And I think the one thing, that you got to make sure that you're doing is that you're carving out time through the preparation so that your defense is getting the looks that you're going to see from, foes that were within the conference and games that are going to be critical, whether that's, multiple tight end sets, two back sets, what have you, right? Option football, obviously, with Air Force, right? Those are all things that we have to be prepared for. And you got to invest the adequate time and energy to make sure that you're setting your team and your defense up for success within that, framework of how you're preparing.
When you were going through your decision making on hiring a defensive staff, you mentioned the 4-2-5. Did you outline like the 4-2-5 as something you wanted to play and then went and found the coach that played that, or did you find the coach and mirror the scheme around that? What was the chicken or the egg thing, right? What came first?
Yeah, I mean, the thing that came first was finding a man of good character, right? I mean, you're going to have someone in a leadership role, and I mean, power is one of those things, man. Right? What's the old phrase, right? Like power corrupts, right? It's a heck of a drug. So you need to make sure that you got a man of tremendous character in that position to lead. So that was first and foremost, right? So we did our due diligence with that. But the one thing that I knew that I wanted to be was, well, I wanted us to have a 4-down front identity, right? I just having those bigs up front, having the ability to have those bigger bodies to control the line of scrimmage and to be stout at level one was really important to me, and just a lesson learned, because in my background at Kent State, the last couple of years we were a 3-3-5 structure. And so again, there's some pros and the cons, intimate of it, and worked with that day in and day out. But just again, as you assess it and you learn, like felt like having 4 hands down and having those edge players that can really get up the field and be disruptive and have some bigger bodies inside and allow guys to play really fundamentally sound was going to be critical, for our success. So, it was a man of great character. It was someone who had a 4-down structure, and Coach Schmidt really separated himself from all the guys that that I visited with that came in front of me. He was head and shoulders above, and really happy that we got him here.
The player acquisition is obviously a continual process now with the portal, high school recruiting. Once spring camp ended, what positions did you and your staff identify that you wanted to add players to the competition?
Yeah, I mean, we want to add and fortify the lines, right, on both sides. The game's won there, and again, you kind of take lessons learned from the draft. Like the teams that are constantly doing it well, their lines are deep and competitive, right? And so, there was obviously some movement along both lines when we first got here, right? And then there's some movement along both lines at the end of the spring. So that's always been a priority of need and an area that we're going to continue to invest in and look at, right? And then you want to have difference makers and spots just where we felt like we need to add a little bit more, competitive depth as well as we move through it. So there was a heavy emphasis, on the box and the line. We feel pretty strong about, where our other position groups are at right now.
Is
And
there a
Coach,
point? Is there a point where, as I said, it's a continual process, but is there a point where obviously your scholarships are running low and you get a point where you're comfortable and then you move on to your summer and the high schoolers coming in, or will you be looking to pick guys up all the way up until fall camp?
No, we want to have this done here in the relatively near future, right? I think if you're waiting, you get too deep into the summer, and guys aren't here to maximize getting to know their teammates, building connection, building trust, and doing great work over the summertime. It's going to be hard to plug and play someone, later. So, we want to get the guys in here, hopefully have this all wrapped up, May, early June, know what our team's going to be. Then obviously roll in the high school signees based off of when they're graduating and when they'll be able to get into town and everything. So that way, again, like we can get to the business of continuing to build this culture and building a team, as we come together and get ready for the season.
Coach, before unlimited transfers, development typically meant you get a high school kid, red shirts 1 year, developing that freshman year, and then by the redshirt sophomore year, if he's really good, like you're ready to run there because he's got his man strength and all that kind of stuff. Now that guy is going to start 1 year, and the vultures are going to circle him, and they're going to be like, you got to go, right? And it's we love the idea that everyone's doing everything they're supposed to be, but they're contacting coaches, parents, saying, hey, hit the portal and we'll have a place for you with money and all that stuff. All that tampering is taking place. So I guess, what does development look like? Because I know it's one of your values, things you believe in at its core. So what does development look like when the reality is you may not have the full 5 years that you used to have to be able to bring a player along?
Yeah, I still think you need to pour into the development piece of it, right? I mean, these high school athletes, if they're ready-made men, they're going to be above our head in the beginning of this whole thing, right? And so the guys that have been great here and historically at this level are guys that develop during their younger years of college, right? And I think so that goes into, again, the physical, the mental, the football IQ. You're developing all of that so a guy's peaked and ready to play as he moves through his journey, right? I think the critical piece now is that you have to do a really good job. And again, this goes back to the character piece. This goes back to, the relationships, but developing that trust, developing the relationships that you have with these young people so that they know they're in a great situation, that's built on truth, that's built on connection, and that's built on that mutual level of respect that everyone craves, right? So that as, if the vultures start to circle, to use your words, right? Like you have this relationship to where the kid knows, okay, hey, from the time that I started talking to these guys in high school all the way through, to present moment, they've been true to their word. They've poured into me, and all the dreams that I want to accomplish can happen here. And hopefully you've developed that bond, and hopefully you've developed that relationship, and hopefully, that's enough. But if it's not because there's an opportunity, then hey, that's the reality that we're living in. And hey, good for that young man, good for his family to position himself in that manner. And then we got to do a great job, right? Go and find the next young man to pour into and to put our time and energy, into that situation so that we can do what we need to do here and stay really, really competitive at a high level.
And that honesty, of course, it has, a flip side. If you have a kid in the program who you don't feel like is progressing, that it's not working quite as well for, you want to be honest with them and be able to say that as well, that there might be more opportunity for you elsewhere. I guess you've been asked this question before, and you say, as long as you're honest, it's not a hard conversation. But at the same time, spring just ended. you have all of these player meetings. I mean, there has to be some level of you that trying to navigate that, has to be pretty challenging.
Yeah, I mean, again, there are honest conversations. You understand there's people that are involved with all of this, right? To where I'm living my dream, the kids are living their dreams, right? And when you deliver, the truths that are not the warm and fuzzy ones, right? But just, hey, there's some deficiencies that we got to fix here, and there's some areas that we need to grow, right? Like you feel for, the young man that's sitting across from you as you go forward with all of that. But again, like, we have a few non-negotiables in our program, and the very first one is to tell the truth, right? And to be truthful. So we're going to tell the truth about everything all the time. We say that secrets are lies within our program. And so again, if I don't exhibit those behaviors, if I don't exhibit that standard, then no one else is going to follow that as well. And again, like, I've made note of this in the past as well, to where the finite amount of time that these guys have to play this beautiful game, like, I want them to be in a position where they know that they can grow and develop with where we're at, right? Or also to where, if there's a better opportunity that them and their family feel, then they can pursue that as well as we move forward with all of it.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, have a lot of these discussions behind transfers are, NIL is a big part of that. You have definitely embraced that, at least in your 5 months here at San Diego State. You know, it's not something that San Diego State or Aztec Nation has necessarily been used to, right? Um, Donating to Aztec Link, being part of that. Why do you think it's so important for Aztec Nation to be a part of that? So you, when you're going out and recruiting, have the resources that you can be that you need to maybe do the things that you want to do.
Yeah, because it's a piece of the puzzle right now, right? And if we put our head in the sand and pretend like it doesn't exist, then we're not going to be competitive in the talent acquisition space. To put it very simply, right? There's still that the fact of the matter, right? To where every single family and every single young man that comes on campus, right? They want to make sure that they know, okay, hey, like, this is a place that, their son and where that young man, that prospect, feels comfortable living and calling home, right? You want to make sure that the piece of the puzzle when it comes to academics and the degree and the network that you're going to be able to then tap into when you graduate, with the life skills and life experiences that you'll have while you're at San Diego State, right? That's a huge piece of it, which we check, right? And then they want to know, okay, hey, what does the athletic journey look like? What's my path as a football player, right? As I'm pouring into this thing, to get on the field, what is the track record with that position group, right? What's the history of success within the program? So those three pieces are critically important, right? And now there is this piece of, the collective. There's the piece of the NIL, and to be able to maximize as they grow and as they become one of the best players on the team and within the community, right? To maximize that value as well. So they want to know that you're competitive in that area, the same way that we're super competitive in all the other areas. And shoot, this is our team, right? This is our town. And so it's going to take all of us to build this thing up the right way. And been very appreciative of all the support that everyone's given us. And it's something that we're going to have to continue to do, right? Week in, week out, year after year, to stay competitive at the level that we all expect to be and that we all want to be.
That's great, Coach. Last question for me. Could you tell me a little bit about how you lead your coaches and about how your perspective on leading the other men who have obviously committed a ton of time to do this journey and this work with you?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's telling the truth, right? Like, being very clear in the vision that we want to have, the brand of football that we want to have, what our plan to win is, and being very detailed so that they know, as we're learning one another, about what we're looking for within each position group, within each individual that's coming in. So it's a lot of shared time. It's a lot of time on task. It's making sure that, hey, if you got questions, guys, ask, right? Like, I'll end every single staff meeting with, okay, does anyone have anything for the good of the group? Like, honestly, and I want to hear feedback. I want to know where they're coming from, right? Or, I love asking the questions like, all right, hey, what's a blind spot that I'm missing, guys? Like, what's something that's going on in your position room right now that's a blind spot to me, so that they can shed a light on some things, and they can open my eyes, or reveal a situation that's going on, good or bad, right? Like, and again, I also love to ask, like, hey, who's someone that deserves an attaboy from me that maybe I'm missing, right? From the 30,000-foot level, as I'm kind of managing everything, right? And so that's one of the things that I love, my coaches telling me and letting me know, hey, so-and-so deserves an attaboy, coach. Like, if you can just, grab them, like, hell yeah, absolutely. Like, to promote the things that we're asking them to do, like, without a doubt, right? So just, man, being as detailed as possible, sharing that vision, and then getting out of their way and equipping them with what they need to be successful, right? Like, again, that's kind of what I feel my job is to make sure that everyone knows what the job is that they've been charged to do and that they have the resources and equipment and manpower to get it done. And then I ain't very smart, so I'm gonna get the hell out of the way and let them go do their job and make it happen.
Last question. It's a non-football one. I recall an interview I think Bryce Miller at the UT did with you. He wrote an article about it. And there was a mention of a victory cigar after a game. And so I have to ask what Sean Lewis's preferred cigar is as a victory cigar.
So it's going to be a really bad answer. When that came out, like fans and people around the program, like just started gifting cigars. And
Oh,
so it's really, it's the only time I smoke cigars besides other special occasions, right? But winning's a lot of fun and it's really hard. And so we're going to take the time to celebrate that. But like, I do not have a favorite, style or brand, if that's even the right reference. It's just I got a little humidor that again was gifted to me by my brother-in-law, and like there's some sticks in there, and we just grab one and we go whenever we get a great opportunity.
awesome, awesome. Hey, whatever works, whatever works.
There you
A
go.
victory cigar, you can't go wrong with a victory cigar.
That's right. That's the best one. Just one to celebrate the good win and all the hard work that went into it.
Coach, we appreciate you taking the time. We look forward to see how this transfer portal ends up with the roster, and obviously fall camp. I believe is 2-3 months, mid-July-ish. So yeah, we look forward to seeing how the roster shakes out and how the team looks in the fall.
Guys, appreciate it. Thanks for the opportunity.
All right, have a good one.
All right, guys.
Paul, we had Sean Lewis, head coach of the Aztecs football team, on the podcast. Hopefully, the first of many.
Yeah.
As our podcast, progresses, and obviously Sean Lewis's tenure at San Diego State progresses. What are your quick takeaways from our chat with him?
I mean, I think it was great. I enjoyed getting to do that. I think that with most of the times that we've talked to them, I've always left with like a couple extra defensive questions that didn't quite get asked or didn't,
Yeah.
And so I liked the way that he responded to it. I thought it was really interesting, and I think it's true and smart. He didn't argue with the idea that ball control will make you have better defense. But what he said is, there are many ways to win, and you don't just have to do it one way. And having some ability to outscore your opponent, this is now me paraphrasing, it's what I understood the idea of, is just as a legit way, and you have to have conviction for it, and you have to actually go after it fully. And so I think that it's interesting because when you do look at the whole body of work, right? The offense that looked, I guess, the best whenever Sean Lewis's offense was out there was always the opposition. I mean, and I guess I shouldn't say that. Not every game, and I liked also he said that, but overall in its aggregate, if you were taking an average, now of course Kent State played a bunch of Power Five big time schools like Georgia and things like that, and the score was so lopsided that it's going to give an unrealistic picture. But at the same time, they also blew out some teams as well. And so, if you believe over time that kind of aggregates it out, I think it's a really, really interesting part of his tenure because at least with the final numbers, having a winning defense is not something that's been created as a counterpart to his offense yet.
Yeah, there's no denying that the more your offense has the ball, the less the other offense has the ball, you're going to give up less chances of less points.
Right.
So I believe that. But I think, during San Diego State's, championship runs or successful years, they were controlling the ball, but they were scoring too. They were getting field goals. They were finishing drives of touchdowns. And that's the best defense because then the other team starts to panic, starts to rush, and maybe they don't have to run, they don't want to run the ball anymore because they feel like they have to pass. And then they become predictable. And then you can rush the passer. But like what we saw last year is they controlled the ball. I want to say their time of possession was top 30 in the country at like 35, 36 minutes, but they weren't scoring. How many drives did they, fail to convert fourth downs in the red zone or missed field goals or things like that. And that is what really hurts your defense because you're not the score is not changing. And so the other teams are still running their full offense. But if you're an offense that scores in 2 minutes, and you do it consistently and you do it 4 or 5 times a game, I don't if your defense gives up 20 points, 25 points, hey, guess what? You're still gonna win the game. And
Yeah,
so play to
but
that degree.
yeah, but I mean, 25 points. It, in all of those years, the least that the defense gave up was 29 points
Yeah.
average in a game. So yeah, if San Diego State's defense, if we're talking here and San Diego State's defense gives up 20 to 25 points, which
Yeah.
they could go undefeated.
Doable.
They could go undefeated. I mean, there's zero question about that. The one year that they did in that shortened COVID season at Kent State, that they did have more points than they scored, it's because they averaged 44 points a game, and they were still
Yeah.
giving up in the 30s. But there was such a discrepancy, and so it's just something to really look at it. And I think that as we always try to do, I think we're aware of how much our opinion matters, right? Which is nothing. And so we've always tried to, gauge and understand what the team is aiming at, and then going and saying, did they reach what they thought they were going to do? And so I think that, you like to talk. Yeah, I enjoyed how he said, we used to run a 3-3-5. And it was important that we moved to a 4-2-5 to be able to do that. I thought, the praise that he gave Eric Schmidt, I thought was great. And, as we look back on all of the interviews that we've had, like, man, I want to talk to Coach Schmidt a lot more, all of them. But I mean, Coach Schmidt especially was somebody who stood out as just like, we were done with it. It was like, on to the next one. But I thought all of that was really good. I do think that, that four-man front, being able to get after the quarterback, being able to find ways to create turnovers. I do think that they are in that process of figuring it out. And this, I think, is the I don't know the right phrase. Like, I think in some ways it might surprise people that the Aztecs and the defense that they're known for might take a step back, at least statistically, right? Because the flip side of it is that if the defenses of the past had to play as many snaps as they're going to play this upcoming year, most likely, they would have given up a lot more points too. And so it's that points per possession. We're talking at this like aggregate level, right? But he was very, very he wanted to point out that like each game is different and each game is unique, and you kind of can't have an overarching like this, like it's John Madden football or something like that, where you can, have that overarching. You got to be like, well, what does your offense need right now? And maybe it's going to be, maybe they go up into a game where they're playing a team that they feel like is better than them, and they might want to not play as fast all the time to try to rest it a little bit to be able to give themselves an advantage on that day. Flip side of it is they might see that the other team, they feel like their starters can match up, but they don't have depth, so they want to play as fast as they possibly can because they're gonna run them off the field, and that's going to be the goal. And so I like that perspective, but of course, you can't have those particulars because we can't ask about 12 games, at one time.
Yeah, you can play no huddle, you can play fast, you can get to the line fast, and then not snap the ball until there's less than
100%.
seconds
Yeah.
left. And you can have, if you're Sean Lewis and the quarterback that's on the field, you fully trust them. You can give them that extra. Hey, get to the line. If you see an advantage, if they're out of place, they haven't set up, then go. If not, then hold back, and then we'll conserve time if that's how they're going to play it. I think the other part of it is obviously looking at the transfer portal. He mentioned he wants to beef up the lines, right? And we've seen that they've offered some edges. But right before we got on this podcast, they got another commitment from a tackle, offensive tackle. from Arizona, Joe Borjon, after Nicholas Green committed yesterday. So that's two tackles that have committed. And I think we talked about this after the spring game, and I might have written about it, how, you could potentially look at left tackle as a spot they're looking to
Yeah.
competition and or improve on. Christian Jones was in that spot in the spring game, and he obviously started 5 games or 6 games last year. But we've already seen two tackle commits from their first four. We haven't seen any defensive line guys yet, but there's still plenty of time. But I think that is an emphasis that the staff has coming out of the spring.
Yeah, absolutely. And, in the article that came out on Nicholas Green, that I wrote, he talked about how he thought he was going to maybe come in the interior of the line, but that the staff was like, no, we want you as a left tackle. And obviously that's what he was playing at Tennessee State. And and I think that's what it is. I mean, I think the flip side of it is, not the flip side, but the part of that whole conversation is, Christian Jones, I think, had those mixed reviews. Sometimes it would be like he's coming along, he's doing better, which means that it's not quite where it needs to be. And I think that, there just definitely also seemed to be a little bit of a lack of versatility in Christian Jones's game. He is so big, and the way that he moves, how comfortable do you feel he is pulling? How comfortable do you feel with him, going out and being involved in like a screen pass, things of that nature. I think you start looking in those elements as well, because the more versatility these guys can bring, the more options it gives Coach Lewis. But he did talk about that both lines is what he saw as the weakness of the team coming out of spring, and did say that that's where the game is won and lost. And I think that that's going to be a point. Like, if we're sitting here in the next couple of weeks, right, and we're having the same discussion, like he told us, like that's what he wanted to do. Did they accomplish what it was that they wanted to do? I think the flip side of that is he also said he felt comfortable everywhere else. They did add a running back, they did add a linebacker, but I think that's a pretty significant thing to be able to say, with the number of players that were lost. They feel good about their team elsewhere, and maybe the additions that you're going to see at those positions are going to be, guys that are just too good to pass up. That you might have felt comfortable with your running backs and the guys that are there. But as the article came out about Marquez Cooper, and you got the guy who is the NCAA's leading rusher, which, by the way, it is definitely FBS that he's the leading rusher, and I'm pretty sure he's all of them. He was 15th going into the season. All the juniors above him are gone. And the seniors are gone. So I think it's actually, in any level of NCAA football, he's the leading rusher. It's hard to,
impressive.
huh?
That's pretty impressive.
It's wildly impressive. Yeah. And how do you let go that kind of production about a guy who knows your system, a guy who knows you really well, a guy who can come in and be the kind of running back on day one, for for all of those guys that are in that room. I think it's pretty special. And I think you have to, I think State's going to get to a point where they might have one or two left, and the guys that they're going to use it on are going to say, is there a difference maker? Is there a difference maker? Is there somebody that we can go and grab that we think will marketably make us better, and won't just be for depth? Because these two tackles could very well be that, because they don't have depth right now. The veterans inside, Ross and Miles, like those guys may not come back fully, right? That's always the thing with injuries in terms of weight and whatever. Well, you have Nate Williams on the outside who's played right tackle, and he can slide down, and he would be ready to take one of those positions should they need it, if that's the way they decide to go. So lots of competition, I think that when I look at the transfer portal, I think the guys who left after spring, for the most part, I honestly think would have left if Brady Hoke were still the coach. And I think the ones that were maybe like they really wanted to hold on to were the guys who left at the beginning, the starters, the guys who are all filling up all the Power Five schools. And so, like, while there's been a lot of roster turnover, I think there would have been just as much roster turnover now as we saw, regardless of who was the coach. And I think it's the ones at the beginning that they were trying to find a way to be able to keep those guys in-house.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's a matter of bringing in guys that fit your scheme. And as we've talked about, if you're third or fourth on the depth chart at a position, then you're probably looking to go elsewhere to play. Go down to a lower level, lower conference, lower FCS, maybe JUCO. As we saw with some of the guys that left last year, they ended up at JUCOs, and they're working their way, trying to work their way back up to a Division I level or FCS or FBS. So, yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, I think we keep getting questions from fans on social media like, should we be concerned? All these people are leaving. Why are they leaving? Things like that. And every player has a specific reason. But as I wrote, like it's just normal. I think it's new to San Diego State, but it's not new to college football for the last couple of years. It took a little bit longer to get to San Diego State, I think. Um, but I can't tell somebody not to be concerned when you're fans of players and maybe they haven't played, but they're local guys, San Diego guys. Obviously, you want local guys to flourish at San Diego State. But if they're not going to play and they're not going to flourish here for 4 years, then maybe it's best for them to go somewhere else to flourish. Because at the end of the day, they're still representing San Diego, the city, from where they are, from hometown, wherever they go. So, yeah, fans. I think it's just new to Aztec Nation to see this amount, 17 scholarship players leaving since, the start of the semester. Most of those were obviously after spring camp, but yeah, it's just the way of the world right now.
Yeah, and and to piggyback off of that, I was surprised at how little traction this same topic got when Sean Lewis was first hired.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like when you're losing BCD and Mark Redmond and Cade Bennett, and we can go down the list, it's like, hey, is the sky falling? These were really good players, and
They were pretty loud. Saying these same guys were pretty
same
loud.
guys. Okay, because I must have missed it. I heard it this time around, and for me, I was like, this time around, I was like, okay, yeah, I think there's some younger guys that you would go and you would have said, where does the development piece, where does that fit, and things of that nature, and maybe done some things differently or whatever. But as I said, I think that these are the same conversations that Brady Hoke would have been having with a lot of these players as well. Namely that just like these guys were able to compete and be better than their colleagues in high school, and their colleagues in high school did not get the opportunity at San Diego State that they did. They lost the competition and they hadn't developed enough to be able to retain that spot that somebody else has been competing for and is going to be able to do. So I do think you're right. I do think you're right in them in San Diego State being spoiled. I'll be truthful. I do think that has more to do with the basketball team than I think it does with the football team. I do think that transfers have been coming in and out of the football team with a little bit more regularity. Maybe not many as leaving, but now that you have, Micah Parrish, Lamont Butler, and Elijah Saunders leaving the men's program, and if there was anybody who like wrote about the team, they should write an article that says something to the effect of, if Lamont can leave, anybody can leave. I mean, Sean Lewis talked about trying to get all of the things around a player to be so elite that when the vultures come circling, right,
Mm-hmm.
they're gonna think twice, because they're gonna say, I want to get to the NFL, and I'm here. If you're a QB, I'm here with Matty J, and it's so good here, and he's willing to be there at 9 o'clock at night or at 7 in the morning around my schedule to be able to develop me to get all the stuff that I need, right? Which I should say did not include in my article. totally should have. Marquez Cooper, Matty J was his position coach. And what he said he loved about Matt Johnson as a running back coach at Kent State is that it did not matter the time of day that he needed to watch film with. He always made time to develop Marquez Cooper. And it completely echoed what Coach Johnson said in our conversations with him. But anyway, going back to it, there's nobody who has a greater circle of surrounding intangible reasons to stay at San Diego State than Lamont Butler. And it wasn't enough. So I think that every case is going to be an individual case, but at the end of the day, money walks. And if they're able to continue to have and bolster even more that NIL piece of it, that's the way that San Diego State can continue to be competitive. And without that, you hope that these other things can be there. You hope that a sold out, Viejas or sold out Snapdragon Stadium can be enough. But at the end of the day, this is going to continue to happen unless Aztec Nation can find a way to be able to support these guys with a little bit more money.
That is a topic for another episode.
It is. I'm sorry, I jumped into one.
Yeah. A wild day on social media today for sure.
Bro,
all right, guys. Thanks for listening. Hopefully you enjoyed the interview with Sean Lewis, the head coach of San Diego State football. As always, we appreciate you guys liking, subscribing, following, sharing on all of our favorite platforms. If you're watching on YouTube, please hit the subscribe button. It definitely helps us get our podcast on more searches and higher up in the searches and algorithm or whatever all that stuff means.
Oh, algorithm.
Yeah, people throw that out there, the algorithm. All right, sure. Get it up there. But yeah, if you can subscribe, it's free. You're not paying anything. But it helps us definitely get our numbers up and more visibility for us. We'll talk to you guys next time. You are listening to the SDSU podcast presented by the East Village Times with your hosts Andre Hagberdian and Paul Garrison.